You know, if any of my kids go into the military, which I mean, I'm not against it, but I'm not like cheerleading about it. So.
Yeah, and I think that's the role for us as parents is that, you know, our goal is to equip our kids, make sure that we expose them to different professions and skills that naturally lean toward their inclinations, not what we want, but what they want.
Aristocrats, kings, queens, communists, socialists, anything that says peace, love, and community and utopia, that's a warning sign. That means you need to run away, like real fast. Like, because there's no such thing as peace, love, and equality. That's the most alarming thing to me, Len, because Democrats are just doing what socialists, communists, and aristocrats and kings and queens have been doing for thousands of years. They just manipulate groups of people.
From me, you know, growing up as an African American and understanding African American culture, we didn't see alignment with the Republican Party. We saw the Republican Party as a group of people who voted in their best interest that kept us out. That's why I disagree with both parties. They're both manipulative, and that's the issue that I have. So we've got to be critical in our thinking to not give anybody a pass on everything they do just because it's that person. So there's this weird dichotomy between this idea that we live in a country where everybody's equal, male or female, regardless of your ethnicity and all of those. Those are the ideals that America stands on. But the reality is that we're still not there yet.
I think that you did. I mean, I couldn't have explained it that way. And there's a lot of things in there that I think if somebody listens to that, they're going to, wow, I didn't even learn that in school. Or they're going to go, I forgot that I learned that in school. Just how you gave that timeline. I think the most important part of civics in politics today, especially today, and not just today, but especially today, given the situation we're in right now, is local voting or your local civics. Because to me, when I'm listening to that, you know, unilaterally, right? Slavery is abolished. Everybody, you know, Reconstruction era, all of those things are happening. Everybody should be good. Everybody's going through the same process here, just like you said. But the problem is that in the local areas, those micro communities, you have people that had massive influence and a lot of wealth and a lot of money, and they knew how to manipulate that system. And the abuse isn't just happening to one group of people. The abuse is happening to every American that's trying to be on the level.
I would definitely agree that all politicians, no, I don't want to say all, politicians
are disgusting.
In large part, they use the emotions of people who aren't educated as a way to manipulate. I'm not necessarily a fan of Karen Bass, but I have to check you, man. She's not a DEI hire, bro.
She is.
She was elected as mayor of
Len. On what merit? On what merit? We all know elections in LA are elections, and I would trust a Chinese election over an LA election at this point. We think we're electing someone good, but the problem we see here is that they do nothing and then they lie about it. We don't have a earning problem in America. We don't. We don't even have a spending problem in America. We have a government fraud problem in America, and the fraud is perpetuated by politicians. So, Len, it's not that I don't trust the elections. I just don't trust the data. And I don't trust that the people that are supposed to safeguard us against making sure the data is good, they're not doing it anymore because they have agendas, and you know it. When people are radicalized, Len, merit and righteousness goes away because the only thing that matters to them is the agenda when they're radicalized. If these people cared so much, then why aren't they figuring out how to fund mental health care? If they care so much, if Karen Bass cares so much, why is she not figuring out how to fund a mental health care program in LA County, which is probably one of the largest mental health issues is going on in LA County? Why are we not in this country funding that and funding mental health care? Because to me, mental health care is probably one of the biggest issues we face. And it goes against kids, adults, veterans, so much.
What's important to understand is if you lower interest rates, then it's easier to get money. And if you can get money because, you're a business and you need a loan, it's going to cost you less. If you want to buy a house, you have lower interest rate, then you're more apt to buy a house. But then the problem is that all this money starts to flood the market. And when the money starts to flood the market, eventually the value of the dollars you have in your savings account begins to erode. Now, if you keep interest rates high, then everything that you're trying to buy is more expensive. And so it's very difficult, especially right now, because we have an affordability issue.
The only way for prices to come down and for things to get cheaper is for America to start being a massive net exporter again. And that's exactly what we're becoming. We are now the largest net exporter of gas, oil, and natural gas, which is great. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see more of that. So I think once that starts to happen, and then once we start to see advanced development in other sectors, like AI, maybe some technology, biotech, and I think the economy is going to hyperscale. I think the biggest threat is energy generation. Can you generate enough energy? I think interest rates should be deliberately dropped for certain sectors to spur economic growth. And I think the biggest one is infrastructure. Yeah. Power, water, all of those things, roads, everything that we need for the future, America needs to invest heavily in that.
Welcome to the Family Office, planning for the people who matter most.
Right? I came in here this morning, and this is exactly what I seen right here. This helmet was...
Heck, that's so random.
Well, I'll tell you the story behind this. This is actually a real military helmet. This is, okay. I bought it at a surplus store last year for my son's birthday because he's into military stuff. So he plays this military game on the computer for 5 hours straight. One of those if he doesn't have school the next day, he's on it, right? So I think he's in here with that helmet on playing it.
Talk about being dedicated to your character, man.
I'm not even kidding you. So he's doing World War II simulations with the freaking helmet on, I think. I think that's what's happening right now.
You're developing a general in the Philp household, huh?
Oh, yeah. It's awesome stuff right there. If any of my kids go into the military, which, I'm not against it, but I'm not cheerleading about it. I think he would probably be the one. But he's definitely not. He would probably definitely go to, he's into engineering and stuff. So he would probably definitely go to school. I'm hey, look, if you want to do engineering and things like that, I highly suggest you do military route right now in today's world anyways, simply because of all the new defense companies that are being born right now and AI and just the military will pay for you to go to school and the benefits you get from doing that. I'm like, dude, do that, become an officer, become an O1, O2, get some benefits. Dude, come right out and buy your own house with the VA loan and all that program. It's why not, dude? Why not? Absolutely. So I'm not cheerleading it, but I'm not discouraging it. So
yeah, and I think that's the role for us as parents is that, our goal is to equip our kids, make sure that we expose them to different professions and skills that naturally lean toward their inclinations, not what we want, but what they want. And I think sometimes parents get it wrong because the idea of, I want to raise a doctor or a lawyer or a business professional. And sometimes they just don't have the interest in that. And we've got to really be mindful about how we guide them and how we structure the path they go down. Because on the one hand, we could control and try to, put them in this box. But on the other hand, if we can just expose them to things that they would naturally pick up on their own, then it becomes their decision.
I completely agree. And I think that also goes with the philosophy that my wife had for a long time, which is, look, I'm not going to force you at 18 or 17. I'm not kicking you out. None of those things. Take as much time as you need because you need to grow up at that adolescent stage. And I need the decision not to be something that a counselor made you do, or I made you do, or, I have to do it because my family has always done this, or certain family cultures, you have to become a doctor. I don't want it to be anything like that. So for me, having that approach is probably the most stress-free approach, because I think it's hard on young kids enough and having an expectation of like, oh, I have to do this or you have to be there right away, I think is just way too much for someone. And I think I think people get forced into a lot of areas of life that they don't want to be forced into prematurely.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. But it's so weird because, and then we'll go on to what we came on to talk about. But I have some people in my life where the parent, like I have, for example, my dentist. I've been with my dentist over 20 years, and so I've known their kids since they.
I'm a little envious of that.
Oh man, yeah, it's pretty cool.
I'll tell you why though later. I'll tell you why.
Okay, so anyway, the son went off to college and went to dentist school, and the dad said, look, you can't come and work with me right now, but I want you to go and intern for someone else, learn your craft, and then when you're ready, you come back. And so now the son is like in his late 20s, early 30s now. And eventually he's going to take over his dad's practice. But it was his decision to make, and in situations like that, I applaud that. Like, especially like if you're third generation farming and, your family is responsible for feeding part of the world. I think there's some credence to staying in alignment with what the family's doing.
Normally by the third generation, family businesses or fortunes disappear or crumble. It's usually on the third. I think I gave you that book, right? The Dirty Little Secrets of Family Business. Mm-hmm. It's such a great book. Greg Terlecki gave me that book.
Oh, okay.
Like 7-8 years ago, we did an advanced class and he gave that book. And I swear I read that book like 3 or 4 times. And I had everybody read that book that was close to me. I went, this book is absolutely amazing. Like everybody needs to understand that if you care about family legacy and all that.
That's right. But, yeah, absolutely.
But I feel like we're official, or we're becoming official, Len. You know why? Because we're recording on a Thursday, and we normally don't record on a Thursday. And for our audience, and for those people as small as it is, we're recording on a Thursday because our recording we did on Monday, the whole thing had an echo.
And it sounded so great live. I mean, we thought there was a little bit of a challenge, but it turns out the whole thing was ruined. So,
and I'm sure there's people in this world that are looking at us like going, what asinine these guys are. Which is fine. That's okay, because I want other people to see that and go, hey, look, because this isn't something where it's like, I mean, and I understand with the little world we live in today and it has to get to that level, but I do also appreciate the fact that people can still see something that when you go back and you look, you could see the progression, right? I'm sure it is with a lot of different things, but yeah, I don't think we're as bad as other things are. At least I don't think we are anyways. But the reason why I was a little envious of you is because I had the same eye doctor from like 2001 to like 2022. And I was so upset when I had to leave that eye doctor. So I'm a little envious of that relationship that you have there with that dentist. But
all trade-offs though, man, because had you stayed with them, you'd be here in California with all of the high taxes and, state taxes and gas and all of that. So, well,
I don't want to talk about California, but because there is a lot of things, but first and foremost, I mean, yeah, look, since we've talked Monday, it's become very, very, very hot subject. And I didn't even think it was going to become this hot. I don't think either of us did. But the Supreme Court ruling of the Louisiana districting based on ethnicity has completely got a massive, massive amount of attention. But also at the same time, it's starting to show a clear picture that it's not looking good for the midterm hope that Democrats had. And at the same time, peace talks are going well. Marco Rubio delivered just an amazing press conference yesterday, I think it was, because Caroline is out. And I think he absolutely smashed it. I don't know if you saw it or not, Len. It was like an hour.
Okay.
And clearly things are looking good. And he brought up a good point in regards to the Strait of Hormuz and the blockage and stuff like that, where it's like, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I didn't even realize it. And this is exactly how we're not focused on this stuff. We're trying to focus on our families and our businesses, and we want to commentate on this, how it comes to us. But I didn't know that a lot of that's international waters. I'm sure it was. I guessed it was. And Iran is like trying to take tolls in international water and putting mines in international waters. And I'm like, holy moly, right? So I'm thinking to myself, and France is now sending their only aircraft there. So things are looking good. But I think I'm not surprised about the off ramp, by the way. I'm not surprised about, you're smiling right now, Len, so I can't wait to see
France's one plane they sent. So I was chuckling about that. Well, the last time we talked really underplayed how strong military is. And I wouldn't say they're formidable compared to the United States, but they're no pushovers. So, but keep going.
But they have one aircraft carrier, and they're committing that to, this Operation Peace, which are trying to get all these stranded ships out of the strait now, because clearly it's become a humanitarian issue now at this point. And I'm so happy, because exactly what I thought was going to happen. The rest of the world is now waking up and going, yeah, you know what? We're sorry, Daddy. We're sorry, Trump. We're sorry, United States. Trump de facto, because he's the president right now, but we're sorry, America. And I think the rest of the world is starting to wait. Not all the world, but at least the world that we have propped up for the last 30, 40 years is starting to realize now. I mean, France saying an aircraft carrier. But yeah, I don't want to go into California right now, because they just recently, I don't even want to go into California about the fire.
Let's stay on top.
Just keep it, let's keep it tight. But Len, what do you have to say about that? Because the districting stuff is actually looking to, this strike down is looking very detrimental. And I don't think the Democrats are going to take the midterms or even it up. I think they're going to lose seats come midterms now, at least as of it is right now. That's what it looks like to me anyway.
So if it comes down to using an age-old strategy to change district boundaries in order to win seats, that says a lot about where the Republican Party is. Because if you look at the way the democracy is set up, the way it's supposed to work is you're supposed to get elected into office based on your alignment with the issues of your constituency. And so what it sounds like you're suggesting is, because of this strategic trickery and the shenanigans, that it's going to change the outcome of elections. I think if what I'm interpreting, that if that's what you're saying, there's a problem with that, because right now you look at the shifting tides between the Republican and the Democratic Party, which is this: the Republicans have a president who is overwhelmingly unpopular, and there are policies that the Republican Party have allowed to happen that the populace is very, very upset about. For example, the war in Iran. And so, yes, there's a momentary quote unquote ceasefire that's happening. There's a couple of skirmishes here and there, but make no mistake about it, that war is not over. And so unless the war is over and peace is happening in November, the Republicans are going to suffer a landslide, my opinion. And so it's interesting that we look at the same set of facts and come out with completely different conclusions. But let me say this in conclusion. As it relates to redistricting, I think when you look at the negative impact, so they're using the fact that the courts are saying you can't redistrict based on race. And so because Democrats overwhelmingly vote Democrat, then they can use that as a way to change the district boundaries. And so to say that doesn't have an impact on race. But the thing in Louisiana in particular is you have a large African-American demographic and you have a large Caucasian demographic. And so, and where they live are very, very different. Like you and I grew up in California. We don't have the same stark differences with regard to our neighborhoods. And so it's a lot easier to use politics as the approach to change congressional districts, and that the impact will definitely hurt African Americans and their voting rights and their voting power in that state in particular. Now, when you look at that across the entire country, it'll definitely not have the same dramatic impact, because nationwide African Americans are around 12, 13%. But in Louisiana, that percentage is significantly higher, like over 30% there. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what the large impact is going to be as it relates to the midterms. But make no mistake about it, you're right that Louisiana is definitely going to suffer from this.
I don't think that anyone looks at it and sees the problem, though, when you say, Democratic voters are overwhelmingly in this group of people by ethnicity. Doesn't that seem to be an alarming problem in itself? Like, why is it that a certain group of people based on ethnicity vote a certain way? That to me looks almost like manipulation. And that really is the Democratic Party, by the way. They have manipulated certain groups. They did it with African American groups. They were doing it with Hispanic Latino groups, and then they stopped doing it, or it's not that they stopped doing it, they're still doing it, but that group just happened to be, I think technology and social media had a lot to do with that ethnicity not getting too entrenched with being romanticized by the Democratic Party and the false lies, because in the reality, it's not really Democratic Party that does it, right? It's not. That's just the name of the group that's doing it today. It's still the same human nature, and it still falls into the same exact category of control. Excuse me. The same category of control. And that same category of control is aristocrats, kings, queens, communists, socialists, anything that says peace, love, and community and utopia, that's a warning sign. That means you need to run away, like real fast. Like, because there's no such thing as peace, love, and equality. There just isn't. Now, there's equality under the rule of law. There's equality under merit, and that's what we can measure. But that's the most alarming thing to me, Len, because Democrats are just doing what socialists, communists, and aristocrats and kings and queens have been doing for thousands of years. They just manipulate groups of people because they show them, oh, you're disenfranchised because you're this. And what do kings and queens do? Oh, you're dumb, deaf, you can't read. So therefore you're this, right? You're a peasant because you can't read, right? You're a pet. I read this interesting thing, and I know I'm going off into this other direction, but the suit is dying. You know why the suit is dying? Mm-mm. Because the suit comes from a world where looks were the currency, right? If you looked good, like, for example, in this, I always wondered this when I was an adolescent, but I'm like, why does the murderer show up to court with a suit? Like, why is the child rapist wearing a suit in court? Like, who cares what he's wearing? Why does he have to wear a suit when he goes to court? He's a freaking rapist. Tar and feather him in public square. Why is he? Because that comes from an era where that was dignified, right? That if you wore a suit, bam, right? Your Sunday's best. That's dying because there's been no replacement for it yet. No one's replaced that yet in the modern world, right? So they're doing the same exact thing to African American communities and Latinos and all these voters that socialists and communists and kings and queens have done for thousands of years. Diversity is the answer, right? And you know this, Len. I mean, when you look at businesses, the most successful businesses are diverse. They have multiple types of people employed there across multiple generations, right? Mm-hmm. You and I know this. You ran a massive organization. You ran a massive organization, and your organization was probably the most diverse organization within that organization, if you follow me, right? Mm-hmm. And it still is today. Mm-hmm. So you understood the power of diversity. I don't think the Democrats understand the power of diversity. I think that's why they're getting killed right now, because they're hanging on to that. And you have to see that. I mean, you have to see that. So I don't think it's Republican trickery. I think it's Republican. And the Supreme Court did this. So it's not really like the Republicans did it. The Supreme Court handed down and said, look, you can't district based on ethnicity. And now as a result of that, districts have to be redrawn. And that's not trickery. That's just the rule of law. That's equality under the rule of law.
So I won't make an attempt to speak for all Black people, but I can definitely tell you as a Black man, I have a perspective as it relates to, you talked earlier about Democrats and Republicans and things like that. Now, of course, without doing the whole history lesson, African Americans were largely a part of the Republican Party, because when you look at what Lincoln did with the Emancipation Proclamation and all of those things, everybody votes their interest. And so when the Republicans, a Republican president, made a proclamation that freed people who were enslaved, people were saying, okay, that's a president I can align with. And then when you had, the next era where Republicans began to shift their focus and Jim Crow laws and all of those things started to come into effect, that's when the Democratic Party was more attractive for African Americans as a whole, as a voting bloc. So The problem that you touched on, though, is that both parties engage in manipulation. And so what began to happen is overwhelmingly African Americans voted Democrat because the viewpoint from me, growing up as an African American and understanding African American culture, we didn't see alignment with the Republican Party. We saw the Republican Party as a group of people who voted in their best interest that kept us out. When you look at the Civil Rights Act, that was the Democratic Party that championed that cause. When you looked at equal housing, that was the Democratic Party that championed that cause. And so then over time, you see a gradual decline in understanding politics and understanding the importance of what does it mean to vote in the local level, the regional level, the national level, midterms, and all of those things. We, over time, as a population, became, and when I say we, I'm talking about us as Americans, not, African Americans in particular, but as
all parts to the whole.
We overwhelmingly became unengaged in the whole political process because we don't necessarily now look at it as life and death. It's just like, when you have the ability and the situation where you don't have to worry about your next meal, you have a job, you have a decent lifestyle, those things that they're not necessarily connected directly to how you vote. And so we've grown a bit, what's the word I'm looking for? We've grown, we're in a situation where it doesn't matter as much as it did before. And so now what's happened is the Democratic Party said, oh, well, we see that African Americans overwhelmingly vote for us. So we're going to find topics that impact them emotionally. So like education and healthcare and immigration. And so then they use our complacency as a weapon. And so now what we're understanding, that's one of the reasons why I was independent. It's like, look, fiscally, I align with how the Republicans think. I'm a believer in smaller government. I'm a believer in a balanced budget. I'm a believer in the importance of allowing businesses to thrive and flourish. Leave me alone. But then from social side, I'm more, a little bit more liberal now, but I still filter that through my Christian views. And so being independent gives me the flexibility to vote my conscience and not along party lines. That's why I disagree with both parties. They're both manipulative, and that's the issue that I have. So we've got to be critical in our thinking to not give anybody a pass on everything they do just because it's that person.
I don't even know if anybody could have put that more well point. I guess my question back to you and listening to that, and by the way, I appreciate the topic because I don't think a lot of people would dare to even talk about this live, especially given, who we are, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning like you got a white man and you got a black man and we're talking openly and spirited about this and we're not holding back. And that I think is really the point of what we're trying to convey to a lot of people a lot of times is that you should and you can have these types of conversations because it's not, I don't demonize your perspective, your light about it. I guess my question to you is that I would ask this is because traditionally, or historically, based on what I know and what I've studied about my American history that I know is, and I would ask this, is the African American community is a thriving community or traditionally was a very entrepreneurial community and very thriving and very business forward, very fiscal, very responsible community. And you had that, you go back and you study that history, especially in the South. Majority of businesses and entrepreneurs were black and African American people. Now, given that section of the country, ethnicity wise, you have majorities, but still, that was a very thriving community. There was a lot of things going for you. And then all of a sudden you have this shift where you don't have that as much today. You don't see that as much today. And then you also see and maybe you can answer this question as well. You see more broken households, less fathers in the house. You see worse schooling, worse test scores. So to me, it almost seems like when did that shift happen? When you had this thriving community that was empowered and producing and didn't need all of these quote unquote supports and helps because they're skin color. And now all of a sudden it shifts. Why? Why did that happen, Len? Because you look at a place, and we talked about this. I know you're smiling, so you're gonna help me out here. But you look at a place, and here's the only thing I could look at. You look at a place like Chicago, Illinois, which has some of the worst testing scores, and then you see the mayor encourage the kids to ditch school because their teachers were gone on a May Day rally. So, so that to me just reinforces all of those things. Like what is happening here? And I think you and I both could agree that the Democratic Party today is not the Democratic Party that championed all the great things that you just talked about, like equal housing, equal rights, the abolishment of Jim Crow, all of those things, the 60s, all of that stuff that happened. That Democratic Party, that they don't exist anymore. If the Democratic that Democratic Party that existed here today would be called fascists by the Democrats leading the Democratic Party today. So I think what I mean when I say that, I'm going to turn it back over to you. The Democrats are manipulating. The Democrats today are still using they're abusing the merits of their predecessors and the work that their predecessors did that was genuine at the time for equal rights for people. And they're abusing those merits for control today. That's really what I say when I say that. But Len, but am I wrong on that point that I made earlier about it just somewhere it shifted in what was that reason? And maybe it was rules and regulations and stuff like that. I don't know. But to me, it seems like we went backwards and not forward in regards to that. And it seemed like we were on the same track with Hispanic voters as well, the control and the manipulation.
So the question you asked is a very, very touchy subject because there is no one monolithic view.
You didn't expect it to be touchy?
Right.
You didn't.
What I'm telling you is that, if you ask 10 different people, you're going to get 10 different answers because it's so nuanced and complex. And the reason why it's so nuanced and complex is because some of the situations that happened back between the 1860s and the 1960s were very, very tumultuous. And some of the reasons why we had success back then go counter to the popular viewpoints that makes America what it is. So let me explain. So I'm very, very clear in what I mean by that. The time in which,
and I don't think in my life and people I know can explain this better than I think you can before you say it.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'll make an attempt. So the time in which you had the Emancipation Proclamation, right? There was a brief period after that, which was called the Reconstruction era. During the Reconstruction era, African Americans had the ability to vote. African Americans had the ability to run for office. And so what happened is an unintended consequence from the perspective of white ruling class men in the South began to have a disparate impact of the new legislation. What do I mean by that? Well, in the South, if you had certain areas where now the majority of the population's African American, the way they vote is going to be very different than the way Southern white planters would vote. And so they had to create laws that disenfranchised that large group of people. So they made it where it had to take 3 black votes to equal 1 vote of a white person. They had to create Jim Crow laws. They had to create, the whole idea of Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. And so now you have this group of people who are now looking to exert their rights, their ability to bank. And the most successful time period that African Americans had was during this Reconstruction era and shortly thereafter, because you had African American communities that were intact. The doctor, you couldn't go to a white doctor to get operated on. So there were a large number of black doctors. You couldn't go to white businesses and do business there. So you had to have black owned businesses. And so African American dollars circulated within the community many times over because there were no other options. And so there's this weird dichotomy between this idea that we live in a country where everybody's equal, male or female, regardless of your ethnicity and all of those. Those are the ideals that America stands on. But the reality is that we're still not there yet. And so one of the unintended consequences of desegregation was that when we started, going into white places, we weren't accepted there. We were actually forcibly pushed out. And so when you look at housing, there were housing laws that went against us, voting laws against us, education laws that went against us. And so if you think about it, the 1960s weren't that long ago. It's not even 100 years ago. And so now you've got 20 generations of slavery, and then you've got a few generations of people that were transitioning out of slavery. And now you've got 3 or 4 generations removed from the Civil Rights Act. And so there are still vestiges of all of those realities, because if I'm a parent and I have a certain mindset, I'm going to plant that mindset into my kids. And if my kids have that mindset, they're going to plant that mindset into their kids. And so when does that change? And so again, I could probably talk for 2 hours on this, because when you talk about, for example, Black Wall Street in Tulsa, there was a thriving African-American community, and the whites around there started seeing that they were becoming more successful than them. And so then they bombed it, right? If you look at Rosewood in Mississippi, there was a thriving African-American community. You look at the same thing in Memphis. And so when we had thriving African-American communities, there were specific targeted efforts to stop that from progressing. So then what happens, and I'm going to come around to now, when you look at families right now, you've got, African Americans largely, are raised by single female households. Well, what happened is that's still a vestige of slavery. And so even though we're years and years removed, our families were separated. There were times where you'd go, a father, a mother, and 2 kids would go to 4 different plantations. And so the reason why I say this is an uncomfortable conversation is because when we come face to face with the realities of what existed, there's this big tension. And here's the tension. The tension is why do you keep focusing on the past? Why don't you operate from the standpoint that we live in a post-racial country? And the reality is that the vestiges and the reverberations and the repercussions and the impacts that happened years ago still affects us. Like, for example, let me try to break it down in a way that would match a modern context. Let's imagine, heaven forbid, you were in a situation in which you were abused as a child, right? You're 5 years old. Do you think that abuse goes away when you're 85?
Not unless you heal. Not unless someone processes it with you. And I think the degree of it, it's that the degree of the trauma will always kind of be with you, but you eventually become more powerful because you heal and you acknowledge it no longer has authority over you.
That's right.
But unless someone processes that with you, it will impact all of every relationship and decision you make will go through that lens.
That's right. And think about it. And every person processes trauma differently. So some people have a higher degree of resilience. They say, look, that was something that happened in my past, and they use that as fuel to be able to overcome it. There are other people that have the same type of trauma and they're consumed by it. Those are two extreme examples. I would say
that's the difference between an emotional person and a logical person. An logical person can get over it easy, and an emotionally geared person has a harder time.
Sure. And sometimes we place more value on the logical person than the emotional person, or vice versa. So
both are needed.
Absolutely. Both perspectives have merit. So my point is if you can take that specific example and you put that on the historical experiences of African Americans here in America, we feel and again, I'm not trying to speak from everybody, but my perspective as a Black person, understanding my culture is that when we hear people say that race and slavery was something that happened in the past, just get over it and move on, we feel like we're not being heard. And so when you feel like you're not being heard, then you keep talking about it because we want to have this conversation. We want to be heard. But then what happens is in public spaces, sometimes we don't necessarily have the ability to articulate what we're really feeling. And so then we get suppressed in terms of, like, for example, people who go, let me not do that. I want to get to your question specifically about Chicago and stuff like that. So when you have single parents that run a household, because of different situations. Now, again, I'm a big believer in family, and Black folks are big believers in family. So I'm not trying to suggest that we aren't, but certain circumstances that happen in our lives really lead to large numbers of African Americans that don't have both parents in the household. And so there's so many different reasons why that happens. To try to say it's this and this is the singular reason really glosses over the complexities. And just in this type of a setting, we really don't have the time to really dig deep because it is so very nuanced. And again, I don't want to try to act like I'm speaking on behalf of everybody, but I do know my people and I do know my culture. So I definitely can speak intelligently on it, but I don't want to come across to you like I like everybody that looks like me agrees with what I'm saying.
No, and I think that you did. I mean, I couldn't have explained it that way. And there's a lot of things in there that I think if somebody listens to that, they're going to, wow, I didn't even learn that in school. Or they're going to go, I forgot that I learned that in school, just how you gave that timeline. And it does make sense because to me, when I'm listening to you, it illustrates to me I think the most important part of civics in politics today, especially today, and not just today, but especially today, given the situation we're in right now, is local voting or your local civics. Because to me, when I'm listening to that, unilaterally, right, slavery is abolished, everybody, Reconstruction era, all of those things are happening. Everybody should be good. Everybody's going through the same process here, just like you said. But the problem is that in the local areas, those micro communities, you have people that had massive influence and a lot of wealth and a lot of money, and they knew how to manipulate that system. And they used the local civics to vote and create local pacts and acts and assembly bills to disenfranchise or to circumvent the national rule of law, which is, hey, bro, everybody's on the same page here now. And that, I think, is still happening today. It's just happening in a lot of different directions, right? It's happening, and the abuse isn't just happening to one group of people. The abuse is happening to every American that's trying to be on the level. Mm-hmm. If there is a level, right? If there is one, right? So knowing local civics and knowing local things is so important, because you can see, at least to me in my mind, I'm going, oh, it was a bunch of guys that were like, damn it, this sucks. We lost, right? The South is lost. Well, we could still manipulate the local civics because they don't know, and we've got the money and we got the people still in the position. So we're going to manipulate the local civics. And by the time they figure it out, they're not going to know what to do with it anyways. And that's exactly what has happened a lot, especially in California. We're going to manipulate the local civics so much. Those people are so scary because they've manipulated the civics down to school boards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Len, you see some of these school board meetings, and I hate them because you see school board meetings and assembly meetings or city chamber meetings are the worst meetings to watch because those MFers that sit up there on those boards sit up in those boards like they're freaking royalty.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely.
And they make these disgusting decisions. These disgusting decisions.
And that's the
like that.
Go ahead.
Like that lady running for governor for California. I can't remember her name right now.
Katie Porter?
Yes. We need to give tax dollars to illegals. Disgusting. Just disgusting. Karen Bass is disgusting. The way she's attacking, what's his name? Running for mayor now of LA. Used to be a reality TV star. You know, Spencer Pratt. He's running for mayor. And you see Karen Bass run these disgusting. Like Karen Bass is disgusting. I'm sorry. I don't like to talk about other human beings like that, but she's a civil servant of one of the largest cities in the country. And the way she runs that and talks about people and it just, ugh. And of course what a shocker. It was a DEI. She's a DEI hire. And you know how much I love that. But that, Len, is the same exact crime today is being committed. And again, I'm not trying to take away from the impact of slavery and whatever, how tumultuous it was for those people of those American citizens, because they're just like me. They're American. They were American citizens 150 years ago dealing with these issues, right?
Yeah.
Whenever it was.
I just want to...
It's the same manipulation, Len.
Yes. I would definitely agree that all politicians... No, I don't want to say all. Politicians
are disgusting.
In large part, they use the emotions of people who aren't educated as a way to manipulate. And they do that on both sides. But, I'm not necessarily a fan of Karen Bass, but I have to check you, man. She's not a DEI hire, bro.
She is.
She was elected as mayor of
Len. On what merit? We all know elections in LA are elections, and I would trust a Chinese election over an LA election at this point. I'm sorry, it's just the way LA is. Len, $100 million that they raised for the Palisade fires, and I promised I wasn't going to get into California. They raised $100 million for the Palisades fire, and they just found out that all $100 million, none of it went to the fires. It all went to the celebrity nonprofits.
Yeah, I mean,
political left-leaning activism.
I am definitely not going to.
That's Karen Bass.
Look, but okay, but this is what I'm saying. Like one thing that is a problem and a challenge is when, like, for example, if you're suggesting that she's a DEI hire, there's other problems that are inherent within that statement. Let me explain what I mean by that. Am I saying that she's the best mayor that Los Angeles has ever had? No, I'm not saying that. Am I saying that there's so many improprieties that's happening with regard to homeless and how the fires were handled? I think there were a lot of missteps. If what you're saying is true, then what you're saying really is that we cannot trust the electoral process because she's a democratically elected mayor who people within Los Angeles went to the polls and voted for. Now, I won't disagree with your statements about California's improprieties and their budget shortfalls and all of the craziness that's happened there. I'm not here to argue that point. The only point that I want to talk about and argue against what you said is that she was not a DEI hire, bro. She was elected. Now, if she were appointed because she was African-American female and all of that, that's one thing. But Caruso spent millions and millions and millions running against her. I thought he was going to win. And, he didn't because the people spoke.
You really trust the voter rolls? If you can't trust the accounting, how can you trust the voter rolls? It's the same. It's math.
No, bro.
I don't question the election.
Accounting and...
I question the accounting in the registrar's office because Bianco
with you on that part.
Because Bianco exposed it. He went, how is it that the state legislator is signing off on more than what we have? How is that possible?
Right.
And that's the problem.
I agree.
Okay, so that's the problem, Len. So if that type of fraud exists there, what makes you think that type of fraud doesn't exist in the voter registration office, because as it does in the people collecting the money and budgeting the money? Because guess what? They're appointed by the same people running who are elected, right? Because the people that are actually doing the work are hired and appointed by the people we elect. So we think we're electing someone good, but the problem we see here is that they do nothing and then they lie about it. It's like when you watch a press, Len, I encourage you this weekend, if you want to like commit suicide, okay? Watch 3 press briefings of the Biden administration and then watch 3 press briefings of the Trump administration. And you will see a clear, I challenge you to watch 3 press briefings from the Obama administration and then watch 3 press briefings from the Bush administration. And you will completely see one unilateral consistency. And that is that the left-leaning people, especially the Biden one, it's worse there because he kowtowed to all the weird left liberal crap that you see happening today, which thank God has been staved off because we got clear, pragmatic thinking millennial Gen Xers running the government now, like Hegseth and Rubio and those guys who are actually and my favorite is Bessett, Secretary Bessett, Secretary Treasury. Bessett, I think, is one of the best Treasury secretaries I've seen in a long time. Ben Carson, all these guys. Is Ben Carson in the administration again or no? Ben Carson was in the last. Man, Ben Carson was great. Ben Carson is one of my favorites. But you see clear, concise, pragmatic people. On the other side, you don't see that at all. So when you watch these press briefings, the one unilateral thing you'll see, Len, is that every time something's not right, there's zero accountability. No, you didn't see that. This is what's happening. And they get annoyed by it. And then they justify it away and they're perfect. When those guys are in office, they're perfect. Like Mandami thinks he's perfect. Karen Bass thinks she's perfect. Newsom thinks he's perfect. Pritzker thinks he's perfect. All these guys, AOC thinks she's perfect. Hakeem, all these guys are ultra realistic. They think they're perfect. And you can see that in the press briefings. You watch a press briefing now or from other administrations, you go, yep, this is what happened. This was going. This is our stance. If you like it or not, boom. Yeah, it happened. So what? Yeah. And you see that now. And you see the pragmatic effect in the government today. And some people just can't handle it. They just can't handle it because it's dismantling all their BS that they've built for the last 30 years, which is for one thing, power and to siphon the people's money. And you're absolutely right, Len, because if all these people that said they're duly elected and they're doing the things that you love so much, which is supporting the people, right? Social programs, which by the way, I agree with them. I have no problem with all the social programs we have. The problem I have is that they should all be paid for no matter what anyways, because the government should be turning a profit and giving that profit back to the people. But instead, we don't have profits in this country right now. Instead, we have new taxes and more taxes, like the tax just passed in California, that if you buy a new house or apartment in California, you're going to pay about $300,000 more for it now because you're paying a gas tax built into your mortgage. And most people don't know that. Len, every month you pay a California Relief Fire Fund tax. It's like $1.50 on your internet or your telephone bill. You don't know that. Most people don't know that. We don't have a earning problem in America. We don't. We don't even have a spending problem in America. We have a government fraud problem in America, and the fraud is perpetuated by politicians because politicians today are richer than actors and actresses. Today, you don't want actor money or fame money. You want politician money because politician money comes with favors. So when I see stuff like that, Len,
but Chris,
I see a Karen Bass, I go, oh, no wonder it doesn't shock me. So I'm not saying that she wasn't duly elected. What I'm saying is she was duly elected on bad and manipulated data because I'm sure 100,000 dead people voted for her. That's what I'm saying. Because Len, I haven't lived in California for almost 5 years now. Did you know I voted 2 years ago? even though I'm not registered to vote there anymore. How is that possible?
What do you mean you voted there?
I voted, but I didn't. I can't vote in that. I'm not registered to vote there anymore.
So,
but how did I still vote? How did I get a ballot in the mail and someone cast a ballot for me?
So did you intentionally vote by mail in California?
No.
Interesting.
Isn't that crazy? My mom still votes too, but yet she's never registered to vote. It's so crazy. So Len, it's not that I don't trust the elections. I just don't trust the data. And I don't trust that the people that are supposed to safeguard us against making sure the data is good they're not doing it anymore because they have agendas, and you know it. When people are radicalized, Len, merit and righteousness goes away because the only thing that matters to them is the agenda when they're radicalized. And this is exactly what we've seen in Iran. People have been radicalized. Iran is under hostage by clerics, and people should be happy at the fact that country is being liberated right now. As much as it's painful, liberation is painful. You know that. Everybody knows that. But that country is being liberated right now. And I'm glad that the rest of the world is waking up to it. But here's my point, because I don't want to get onto that. If these people cared so much, then why aren't they figuring out how to fund mental health care? If they care so much. If Karen Bass cares so much, why is she not figuring out how to fund a mental health care program in LA County, which is probably one of the largest mental health issues is going on in LA County? Why isn't she doing that? And I'm not asking you like you know the answer, Len, but I'm asking because that's a great topic. Why are we not in this country funding that and funding mental health care? Because to me, mental health care is probably one of the biggest issues we face. And it goes against kids, adults, veterans, so much. But I know that was a lot there, Len, on you on that one. But
I don't even know where to go with it, man, because you talked about
just focus on the mental health because Karen Bass just needs to be unvoted along with whoever. I don't know.
Okay. All right. So specifically with mental health, the issue right now is that there is legislation moving toward mental health and physical health being treated the same way. To me, I think it's a national issue because when you look at many of the mass shootings, there is a history of mental health. When you look at homelessness from state to state, there's a connection to mental health. And so I think it should be a federal issue because when you look at the outcomes that people have, mental health plays such an important role. And so now when you look at right now where you've got a shifting economy, we haven't yet talked about Kevin Warsh that is supposedly going to be the new Fed chair. When you look at Gen Z and you look at all of the disparities with regard to income, the cost for housing, there's stress and anxiety that's created by that. When you look at social media and the impact that social media has on how people are perceived based on what they look like and what they wear and their financial wherewithal and all of the pressures that happen around that's anxiety inducing. And so the legislation should be such that physical coverage and mental coverage should be one and the same. And unfortunately, here's the challenge with executing something like that. There aren't enough mental health professionals that actually cover their services with insurance because there's a disconnect there. And so insurance companies make it very difficult to get appointed with them for those practitioners that work in the mental health field to be able to offer their services to get covered through insurance. Because insurance knows they're in the profit making business that if they start covering for mental health, now their profitability is going to go down significantly because it comes back to your point, Chris, that mental health is one of the big social challenges that we need to confront as a country. And if we don't continue down the path of confronting that, there are going to be more people that get killed by people who have mental health challenges. There are going to be more people who are homeless because their mental health wasn't taken care of. And because of the lack of understanding and the increased level of ignorance for people who suffer from mental health challenges, we're not going to collectively do something about it unless we're individually impacted by someone who has mental health challenges. So I don't think that. I think that unfortunately it's going to take more conversations by public media outlets and mainstream media outlets to make this a front and center issue, because people in Congress don't seem to have the will to, to make this an issue. But I think that's the wrong move.
I have an interesting perspective, or an interesting way to ask you this. And I think, and I think it's why Congress isn't interested in it. If we can fund Planned Parenthood for abortions at a federal level, right? Why can't we fund mental health programs? And I know the answer why. And you tell me what your thoughts on this, because there's no ideal to rally around.
Yeah, I think.
Isn't that sad? Because you think about it, women's rights, my body, my choice, abortion, all the things that go along with the ideals behind warranting legal abortion. There's an ideal and an emotional ideal that you can fight against that, and it unifies against, or it stratifies everybody in there, or it gets a large amount of people in there, right? Whereas mental health, there's no really, what ideal can you champion or fight or rally behind, or where someone's going to go, you got to fight for your mental right to health. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing. And that's, I think, is the sad part.
I think there have been attempts, because when you look at a lot of the shootings, the mass shootings, have been people who have mental health challenges. So that could be an avenue. But then you look at people that are, connected to the NRA and all the lobbyists there, that becomes contentious. And so, now sometimes people make the connection between, okay, so what's the slippery slope? If you start legislating mental health, then now you're going to use that as a bridge to start legislating gun control. And we're not having that.
No, we can't have any gun control in this country, because if we lose the right to bear arms, it's dead. We're toast. The whole world's going to fall into communism.
I agree. I do think there needs to be more guardrails, though, on gun control.
Most definitely. And I think you need to renew your gun license or something every some odd years. Like, because like if you're a professional, you have to go through training every year or something. Like if you're a doctor, a lawyer, finance, anything, you have to renew. Business, even a business has to redo filings. So yeah, I don't know how it is in that realm anyways, but you should have to go back and get checked again.
I agree.
I don't think they do that. I think it's one and done. At least in my experience, that's the way it is.
Yeah, overwhelmingly, that's what I understand. And so, I agree. Just like, if you have a driver's license, you have to, renew your driver's license. I think the same thing should be true if you own a gun.
So again, merit base, right? So if these folks really are, these politicians really are who they say they are, then they would find a way to make this work, because they find so many other ways to make things not work. Why can't they find and work, supposedly? Why can't they find a way? I think it was, what did I tell you, Len? We did the study. We had a couple chatbots do it. We had a few, like 3 chatbots do it. And they all came up with a similar conclusion. And that is that, we did it based on the fraud, the $20 billion or something that they lost for homeless stuff in California. With $20 billion a year, you could create a bare bones national healthcare program for all kids with $20 billion a year.
Sure.
It's that small amount of money. And I heard high-speed rail is going to cost $250 billion in California. So see, that to me, again, is the problem.
Misuse and misappropriation.
Right, exactly. So I think mental health needs to be a forefront in the country, because so many people struggle with that, especially young people today. COVID, like there's a whole group of kids that are and they openly talk about it. Oh, COVID screwed me up, or oh, COVID did this to me. And it goes across young children. It goes against middle-aged, young teen children, and then it even goes into adult children, right? And even young adults who are impacted by this. I mean, why are we not looking at that? Why are we not looking? Oh, again, because there's no
emotionally charged issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised though, because we can't question, what the experts did, because that's why COVID's not questioned as much as it should be, because it would go against the opinions and the ideals, because there are people that champion those causes, right? That were for those causes of the lockdowns and now are living with some screwed up kids. And they go, damn, that shit wasn't good.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't a good idea. And they can't argue openly about that, because then they would go back and look like fools, because only politicians can lie and then come back 2 years later. So I didn't say that, even though there's a video of them saying they did it. So, I mean, that's just the reality behind, those types of things, Len. But outside of that, the Fed chair, it's interesting to see here. Has he gotten put in? Is Warsh in, or is it still? It's not in, right? They have, because Powell's there till the 15th, right? I wouldn't want that job. Would you want it?
I wouldn't touch that job with 100-foot pole, and the reason why is because you're in a no-win situation. Because right now you have President Trump that's saying, "Look, Powell, you need to lower interest rates," and if Kevin Warsh comes in, he's saying that he hasn't received any pressure from Trump or any of that stuff. Yeah, because you're not the chair yet. The moment he steps in, he's going to have pressure to lower the interest rates. But then what's important to understand is if you lower interest rates, then it's easier to get money. And if you can get money because, you're a business and you need a loan, it's going to cost you less. If you want to buy a house, you have a lower interest rate, then you're more apt to buy a house. But then the problem is that all this money starts to flood the market. And when the money starts to flood the market, eventually the value of the dollars you have in your savings account begins to erode. And so there's always these important levers. Now, if you keep interest rates high, then everything that you're trying to buy is more expensive. And so it's very difficult, especially right now, because we have an affordability issue. Gas prices in some parts of the country approaching $7 a gallon, which is ridiculous.
You only talk about California, Hawaii, and Alaska.
Well, okay, but I'm sure
California's self-inflicted. Hawaii might be too, though.
Well, the war exacerbated that, because just a few
months. The war's over, though.
No,
the president said the war's over. He said it was over.
The president said the war is over.
So does Secretary of State, though.
Yeah.
Secretary of State at the press conference said yesterday.
And that goes to your talks about the Democratic Party, that you can't believe what politicians say. It's not over. There's some calm that's happening right now, but Iran knows that they have a stranglehold on the global stage right now, so they're not going to relinquish that. But going back to the Fed chair, I wouldn't want his job, because right now, because of the lack of affordability, you're going to have so much pressure on both sides. And until we get to a place where we either start spending less as a country and move towards balancing the budget, the only answer to our long-term success is two things: balancing the budget and striving for a more successful middle class. Because right now you have what's called a K-shaped economy. You have the overwhelming benefits that come to the top 1%, and then the overwhelming detriment of people that don't have that type of income. And there's this wide gap. We need a thriving middle class. And that's really what's made America the thriving economy. It's having a solid middle class. And right now that's being eroded. And so until we get a balanced budget and stop having all of this money that's going to service the debt, nothing's going to change. And so the way to get to that is very painful. And so the quality of lives that we enjoy right now for a while need to change in order for that to happen. So what are your thoughts about the direction of the new supposed Fed chair and all of the challenges that Kevin Warsh, if he's appointed, going to, how do you think that's going to, if you were him, how would you feel?
Do you think he's grandstanding or saying that for show when he says, I'm not going to lower rates? Do you think he's just saying that just to say that? Or do you think he's just saying that now and then when he gets in, he does it? What's your thoughts on that? Real quick.
Yeah, I think that I think that he understands that he has to keep rates high. And so,
I think anybody understands that, though.
I think
right?
he's going to feel pressure from the president. And I don't think he understands how effective Trump is in his bully pulpit to make people bend to his will, because he has the voice of the media. And so people, we're humans, we're going to fall to pressure. And I think he's going to succumb to it as well.
I don't think he's going to lower rates, at least immediately. And I don't think he should lower rates. And the reason why is because I think inflation would come back real hot, real fast, because I think there's a lot of people that, I mean, I don't know, Len, I don't know how it is in California as much as it is here in my area. I mean, I think I live in a bubble where I'm at. So to me, when I go out, it's like, it feels like 2008 to me when I go out. Everybody's free, you know what I mean? Like restaurants are full, malls are full, people are busy, things are happening. I don't know how it is necessarily in your area, but I do know in my area it is happening. Like it's happening. Like it doesn't look like anybody in my area is struggling. Now, again, I could be because I'm in a bubble, but I do also know that like stuff is it's expensive. Like when you can only get a half a tank of gas with $50 in Texas, that's a problem. That's a freaking problem, because normally $65 fills you up at Sam's Club or Costco. That's a problem, right? I paid like $4.50 a gallon, $4.50 a gallon for premium, and I was like, oh, right, for 93. And yeah, $7 a gallon of gas does exist in California. Doesn't exist anywhere else, but that's because California is California. But I do think that he will eventually lower rates. I just don't think now is the right time, because you will create so many people. I think there's a massive amount of people that want to just go out there and just like, I think there's still a large group of people in America today that are holding on to pre-COVID. Like it's going to come back, and it's not. It's never going to come back to the way it was pre-COVID, price-wise anyways. And I do think that COVID did adjust prices up to where they should be based on the amount of debt. Like, you get what I'm saying? So the only way for prices to come down and for things to get cheaper is for America to start being a massive net exporter again. And that's exactly what we're becoming. We are now the largest net exporter of gas, oil, and natural gas, which is great. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see more of that. So I think once that starts to happen, and then once we start to see advanced like development in other sectors, you know, like AI, maybe some technology, biotech, and I think the economy is going to hyperscale. Like Elon Musk, I've listened to Elon Musk talk about that a lot, and how GDP is going to scale fast into the double percentages, 20 percentages. I think once we reach that, you're going to see debt and money is going to be restructured in certain ways where the debt's going to be insignificant, because at this point, the GDP is going to be so large that figure becomes so small now. And we might not deal in denomination sizes. We might have to change denominate, because at one point a dollar is going to be, things are going to have to change structurally in certain ways. And I think that what we're seeing too is we're seeing two worlds clash. We're seeing the old post-modern world is now clashing with the future world. And I think we're experiencing the same clash that the agrarian world clashed when the industrial world came in. Right. And we're seeing that clash. We're seeing the two clashes. We're seeing the digital world clash with the hyper digital world, or whatever the new world's called. Right. Because whatever that is, I just say it's the hyper digital world, because everything will eventually become hyper digital. Right. Like you'll walk around and say, computer, give me a da 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 da, and that will happen. Right. Like, computer, what is the theory of economics in this in the computer? Like you could do right now with the chatbot. And I think that America is going to lead that charge. But I would like to see massive infrastructure spending in America, because I think that if Trump got around that, and I think we've talked about this before, and Mark Cuban has said it before, that if a president goes all in on massive infrastructure, like deliberate infrastructure, like things that matter, like America should be on crazy right now developing nuclear energy technologies and things like that, because the biggest threat to a modern society today isn't necessarily a military. while it still is today. I think the biggest threat is energy generation. Like, can you generate enough energy? And right now, you know who's positioned in America? You know what states are positioned in America the best for data centers and energy swings and output? Do you know what they are? You know what states they are?
More of this in the South, right?
Louisiana, Alabama, all of these states. I think Louisiana or Alabama, one of those, I think it's Alabama, has the highest energy reserve out of any peak energy reserve out of any state in the country. So I think maybe that's how the South becomes economically viable, because the South's been economically depressed ever since, the Civil War, right? Mm-hmm. So I think maybe that's how the South becomes a powerhouse. I mean, that's how California became a powerhouse, because it was a fiscal leaning, pragmatic, right leaning state that embraced business, right? And culture and freedom and American ideals. And now it's just whatever it is. I know I'm going long-winded, Len. Stop me when you want to, but I think the government, and this is where I get mad about government, but at the same time, I think interest rates should be deliberately dropped for certain sectors to spur economic growth. And I think the biggest one is infrastructure. Yeah. Power, water, all of those things, roads, everything that we need for the future, America needs to invest heavily in that. And I think that's also the reason why we're starting to cut off the rest of the freeloaders in the world, because we need that money to be repatriated here so that people here can stop going, oh, things are so modern. Yeah, because we're paying for it to be modern in other countries.
Yeah, I think when you look at interest rates and you look at the purpose of fluctuating interest rates up and down, it has to be with a specific purpose. And so in order for that to happen, the only way it works, it goes back to my original point of having a balanced budget. And the only way to go to a balanced budget is to create austerity measures that really, really hurt us in the short term. And so the problem is that elected officials don't have the political will to do what's necessary. And so because their main objective is to get reelected, they would do whatever is politically expedient for them right here and right now. And the problem also is, you talked earlier in your comments about how we're still, you go and you feel like you live in a bubble. You go to the restaurant, they're full. You go to places where people are spending disposable income. But the challenge is this. Do we really have the financial capacity to spend like we're spending? And I would say no, because when you look at the median income in the United States and you look at the cost of living has gone up disproportionately to the rise in income. And so what's happening is, in our households, we listen to what the United States is doing. We're all deficit spending. That's why credit card debt is at an all-time high. That's why student loan debts are so high. And it's because we're spending money we don't have. And so we all need to collectively tone it down and start understanding, there have been people who have become extraordinarily wealthy that says, you know what, I'm going to live as if I have nothing. And I want to psychologically align myself with what that feels like. So I'm going to purposefully live on $100 to $250 this month. Now, outside of, my housing and all of those things, just to adopt that mindset. And I think that small little anecdotal lesson is a good lesson for us as a country to say we overspend in our households and we overspend as a country. And the only way to be able to come back to the reality of how our lives should look is we need to experience what it feels like not to live in excess. But the only way out of that, going back to a point you made in which I agree, is that if AI begins to take off and we begin to have so much production that we start to create wealth in other sectors, that's the only way out. Now, the part that I disagree with what you said is in the South, when you look at their way out. The problem is that you have all of these data centers that are moving into neighborhoods, and they're moving in without the consent of the people who are being impacted by it. And so I definitely have some major issues with that. To me, there's enough raw land that's away from population centers to be able to look at that. And then, of course, space is another one that we've got to consider. So I like the fact that the Artemis 2 and Artemis 3 that's getting ready to go to the moon, we're going to start colonizing the moon and start using that as an energy source. But that's years and years away. And so when you look at the opportunity to create data centers, I know you need water. So if there's a way that we can find ways to pipe water into places that are away from population centers, I'm all for that. But there's so many people that are poor, disenfranchised, and uninformed about what's happening. Because look, if I'm worried about my meal from day to day, I see something that's being built. I don't necessarily have the luxury to know what's being built. Why is that a problem? I don't necessarily have the luxury to think that deep. So as a country, we have to work towards those situations where people that don't have the luxury to think along those lines, elected officials need to keep that in mind, that what we do impacts our fellow human being. And the South, unfortunately, is right now a place where data centers are thriving to the detriment of the people that are in the area.
And again, it goes, I think, back to the responsibility, which is governments and politicians are there to regulate and to watch and to make sure that the profits of the land are given back to the people. Because I thought, and this is again why the rest of the world hates America so much. And not because we're evil, because they just, again, you spoke about it earlier where you used the word where it impacts, right? It impacts you. So an action, what was that word you used? Where, like, for example, you said African American families are disproportionate today because slavery still has an impact. You said a certain word that it creates that action, right? So in other words, because this action happened, you're still feeling that action, 20 years later, because you used an example as well on it.
Okay,
right?
You're talking about a different impact.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm saying here is that. These politicians are supposed to safeguard and watch out, and they don't, and they're not, and the profits should be going back. And again, this is exactly why the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is still by and large living under communists, socialists, dictators, or monarchs. And at the end of the day, it all goes back to the same system. The whole world grows and raised up on monarchies and kings and queens. Okay. And those are still, by and large, what most countries live under, monarchies, essentially, or dictators, because they want to be like kings, or communists because they want to be like kings. Well, communists and socialists really want to be like gods. They think they're like gods. Like Joseph Stalin thought he was God probably at one point, What's interesting is that if you look at it today, history today, or people that speak out against atrocities today, they only vilify fascists, right? But they don't vilify communists or socialists. Isn't that weird? Like everyone's, Hitler was so bad. We know that. We know. What about Joseph Stalin and Chairman Mao? What about those guys?
Right.
How come no one talks about those guys? How come no one talks about the how many hundreds of millions of people died, right? And that's the thing, is these politicians still do the same thing today, right? And most of them look at America and go, wait a minute, understand. And this is the point I make. Isn't all of this stuff in America supposed to belong to me and you, Len?
Absolutely.
Like, this land is my land, this land is yours. Aren't the politicians supposed to just make sure that the national sovereignty and the national wealth of the sovereign of America is just preserved for everyone, regardless if you're black, white, Hispanic, Latino, gay, straight, whatever? But instead, we've created all these ideals and all of these things around all these things that we have to protect, which really is just one simple thing. America is a corporation. It always has been. It needs to continue to be. Make money, maintain sovereignty, make sure that Apple's not dumping poison in its phones, and away we go. And let Elon Musk buy Spirit Airlines.
Did you hear about the social movement? There's a guy on Instagram and TikTok that's getting a lot of interest, and they're looking at crowdfunding Spirit Airlines. Did you hear about that?
I only saw that Elon Musk was maybe buying Spirit Airlines. I hope someone buys it. Like, that would be super cool I hope someone buys Spirit Airlines and completely reinvents transportation in that sector, because we essentially own all the airlines. And that's what I'm talking about. We bailed out the airlines. So many, like, millennials in my age group, if you were working hard in the early 2000s through 2008, you know what I'm talking about. And the late 90s, when all these airlines failed and we had to bail them all out, right? We own the freaking airlines. Where's my profit share from Delta, United, and all these freaking guys? Where's your profit share check, Len? I want to know. In fact, if you lived through 2008 as well and we bailed out all the banks, I'm still waiting for my profit share check from that too. Len, did you get yours yet? Because I haven't gotten mine yet.
Still waiting for it, bro.
This is the kind of stuff why we've gotten to the situation we're in. But I don't want to. We're out of time today. But
yes.
Phenomenal conversation today, Len.
And I think enjoyed our conversations, man. I think
we touched on something that was very touchy too, and I think it was handled very well. And I like the way it went because it needs to be talked about. It absolutely needs to be talked about. And people need to remember these things and how we got here, because when we start encouraging kids to go protest in the streets instead of learning how to read, then they can't read anymore. That means they can't read books anymore, which means they don't understand history, which means they don't understand how we got here. And if they read more history and they read more stuff, they would understand that the hammer and the sickle is evil. And it is not something that's virtuous and great. And it doesn't work because it's been tried. Go read a book. Instead of talking so much about how Hitler was so bad, because he is, go look at Chairman Mao and go look at Joseph Stalin, please. And you will see they were probably far eviler, if not the same, as Hitler. So
I agree. Well, Chris, it's always interesting having conversations with you, sir. And I never know where we're going to go in our conversations. And so it was good. I enjoyed this. And for those of you that are watching, find people that you can learn from and that you don't have the same shared background, so you can continue to look at life through somebody else's lens. And that's what we look to do here on this channel. So if you like what we do, feel free to subscribe and tell other people. And if you don't, it's okay as well. Comment, let us know what your thoughts are. So with that being said, Chris, it's always a pleasure. Until next week, man, you take care.
See you in the next one.
Conversation has given you clarity on your next steps. Please share this episode with someone who's walking the same path. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss future episodes. And remember, planning ahead isn't just prudent, it's an act of care. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on The Family Office.